Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and I can't stop running this Shadow Camerupt team in the Open Grey League. Now this is a team created by Salted Koji, the Japan national champion from 2025, and it is arguably one of the most fun teams you could run in the Open Grey League. The team is as follows: Galarian Moltres lead, Shadow Camerupt as the save switch, and Aegislash as the closer. I featured this team previously with someone else playing it, but I wanted to try it for myself, and I've got 9-1 in my past 10 battles. This is a very difficult team to use, however, it's been some of the most fun battles that I've had this entire season. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we pick up a bit of an interesting lead, Galarian Moltres into Shadow Toucanon. I'm very grateful that the Toucanon did not build up to Beak Blast, because Beak Blast can actually threaten a knockout, whereas a Drill Peck I can very easily survive. So I fire off the fly, for shield advantage, and then it's time to send in Shadow Camerupt. Shadow Camerupt up a shield is just an absolute nightmare to deal with. My opponent sends in Diggersby, and this is a very good Pokemon to bait out. I shield up the Scorching Sands, but unfortunately, bad luck strikes as I do get Scorching Sands debuffed. That means that I can no longer go for a Scorching Sands and a farm down, and instead, I'm going to be forced to throw all 100 of my Camerupt energy. Scorching Sands will knock out the Diggersby. My opponent in the back has a Carbink, and this game looks winnable. I pivot into Aegislash, they bank energy, and then send in Shadow Toucanon. Shadow Toucanon able to make a Beak Blast. Beak Blast is resisted, but Beak Blast is an absurdly powerful move, so that still does quite a lot of damage to Aegislash shield form. I'm just going to go for the Gyro Ball as soon as I get it, because I want to take advantage of the faster energy generation in Blade form. Unfortunately, I pay a very heavy price staying in Blade form as the Pecks have almost fully farmed me down. I make the Gyro Ball, which is going to knock out Toucanon, but I have to switch out into Galarian Moltres to reset Aegislash back to the bulky shield form. This limits the farm for Carbink, and now the question is, can Aegislash, with almost no HP remaining, make it to the Gyro Ball? It's going to be close, but on 1 HP, we barely hang on. Aegislash, just enough health remaining. We make the Gyro Ball, pick up the one-hit knockout onto Carbink, and that is a good game. Hopping into game number 2, leading Galarian Moltres into Unova Stunfisk, and this is a massive core breaker for this team. Unfortunately, with Stunfisk leads, I'm kind of forced to stay in and play it out. Even though I'm not running Payback, I'm hoping that if I overfarm enough, my opponent will think that I have Payback and then potentially put up a shield or try and go for a catch. I overfarm massively, go for the Brave Bird, they catch onto Wigglytuff, presumably thinking that it was the Payback, but it was not, and I decided to send in Aegislash. I could have brought in the Camerupt there to get a farm down, but I decided that I would rather save the Camerupt for the endgame, because Camerupt does have a resistance to their Thunder Shocks. So at the very least, if I have shields in play for Camerupt, hopefully Camerupt will be my best bet for neutralizing that Stunfisk. Wigglytuff's able to debuff me, but now I can farm up to 100 energy and fire off Gyro Ball. Gyro Ball knocks out the Wigglytuff. In the back is a Bug Bite Fortress. I farm up to 100, pivot into Moltres, and get the catch as they fire off Sand Tomb. That is double resisted. That's not going to do much. With the debuff, they do farm me down before I get a move. But now I have 100 energy on Aegislash, and I have a 2-shield Shadow Camerupt. Camerupt hits the field, there's the pivot out, in comes Stunfisk. Stunfisk has so much stored energy. Unfortunately for me, they are going to make it to a second Mud Bomb before I'm able to make my Scorching Sands. However, this is a very good time to have 2 shields on Shadow Camerupt. I put up the shield, I'm going to throw 1 Incinerate and the Rock Tomb, and when my opponent shields, I can go for the combination play with the back-to-back loaded Shadow Balls. So I pivot into Aegislash, there's the Shadow Ball right on cue. I do have so much stored energy on the Aegislash. Aegislash changes to Blade form, Shadow Ball takes the knockout, they're going to try and Bug Bite down. Aegislash in Blade form is very glassy, but not glassy enough for my opponent to get the farm down. We're going to survive even the Bug Bite that sneaks through here to make a second Shadow Ball. This is going to be picking up the one-hit knockout onto Shadow Fortress, and despite the nightmare lead, we're able to claw our way back and get the win. We go from a terrible lead to an amazing lead in the next match, leading Galarian Moltres into Mudshot Diggersby. It's very difficult to build a Diggersby team that isn't kind of an auto loss into Galarian Moltres, so upon seeing the Diggersby lead, I was pretty confident that my opponent was going to have to stay in. This matchup is so dominant because Diggersby no longer runs Quick Attack. At the very least with Quick Attack, it had Fast Move Pressure, but with Mudshot only doing 1 damage per Mudshot, my Galarian Moltres can take Fire Punch after Fire Punch after Fire Punch and not be threatened whatsoever. If they're this weak to Moltres, then I think holding onto the energy will be pretty valuable. So I'm going to throw 3 Sucker Punches, switch into Camerupt, and get the catch and sneak on the Fire Punch. Now Diggersby is gone. Fire Punch really not going to do a lot, and when they bring in Feraligatr, By being up and Incinerate, I can now win the ones. And winning the ones and having a Brave Bird loaded on Galarian Moltres means this Feraligatr is not going to be on the field for very long. So I farm up to 100 energy, full sending the back-to-back Scorching Sands. Scorching Sands connects, Feraligatr gets KO'd, and in the back is a Shadow Galarian Weezing. Shadow Galarian Weezing is an incredibly cool pick. Unfortunately for my opponent, it's going to be debuffed, and then I just get to send in Aegislash. With a Brave Bird loaded on the Galarian Moltres, all I'll need to do is just make it to a Gyro Ball. My opponent shows they're on Brutal Swing and Sludge. I get to the Gyro Ball, and that is going to be game over, as Gyro Ball guarantees the one-hit KO or the shield, and the moment they give me that shield, then I can just let the Aegislash go and win the game with the Brave Bird. My opponent undertaps Brutal Swing. This is a debuffed Brutal Swing. I'm just going to let it go. I actually survive on 1 HP due to the debuff, but I have the Brave Bird loaded, so my opponent will resign the match. We get back-to-back dominant leads as into the next match, we lead Galarian Moltres into Furret. My opponent safe switches into Feraligatr, and they are completely core broken by Galarian Moltres. Moltres fires off the fly, shield comes up from the Feraligatr, and I just don't think they're going for the Ice Beam. So I instantly no shield, and I get the call right. That is a massive call, as my opponent is going to have an absolutely nightmare time trying to get rid of the Moltres. I'm going to overfarm as much as I can, firing off the fly right before they're able to make the Hydro Cannon. This way, if they end up no shielding, I have enough residual energy to make a move into the Furret, but my opponent commits both shields. And that is the thing you cannot do against this team. Because now, I descended the Shadow Camerupt, get the Incinerate down, and my opponent is about to get fully swept by this Camel. In comes Furret. Furret throws on alignment, trying to cap tie the Camerupt, but I was always just going to farm up to the back-to-back. They're low enough that I can go for a Rock Tomb. They actually make a catch on a Tinkaton, but unfortunately, Tinkaton is about to get absolutely eviscerated by Scorching Sands. One more Incinerate. Scorching Sands is available. This is going to be good night, Tinkaton. Back in comes the Furret. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We're 4-0 in the set, looking for the perfect 5-0, but unfortunately, the Stunfisk lead has returned. This lead is such a problem for this team. It is definitely a lead that is beatable, but you're going to have to play very, very well. It's not going to be easy. I just keep farming. They try and go for a payback catch onto the Togekiss, but unfortunately, I just don't have that move. So I get to bank all the energy on Galarian Moltres, and Togekiss is now locked into its worst meta matchup, which is Aegislash. Due to the Ghost Steel typing and the massive stat product, Aegislash just tanks Aurasphere after Aurasphere as it marches ever closer to the back-to-back Gyro Balls. I get to the back-to-back Gyro Balls. If my opponent shields the first, I'm going to go for a Shadow Ball on the second, because Shadow Ball will still knock out, but it will cover for a catch attempt onto the Stunfisk. They do shield the first. I go for the Shadow Ball, and if my opponent double shields, I have a Brave Bird loaded on Moltres. So they double shield, in comes Galarian Moltres, and I'm able to snipe them down with the Brave Bird. All that Togekiss energy goes down the drain, and back in comes Stunfisk. Stunfisk looking for a farm down, but they're not going to get there. Galarian Moltres leaves with a parting gift of a Fly. Unfortunately, Fly does not do a lot here. I decide that I'm going to hold the shields for the Camerupt and just send in Aegislash. This is going to force multiple Mud Bombs out of this opponent, and then, hopefully, with 2 shields, Camerupt will be able to win the game. So, I just farm ever closer to the move. My opponent tries for a Shadow Ball catch onto Fearow, but I click Gyro Ball. I go for an undercharge. I'm hoping to put them in 1 Incinerate range. The Gyro Ball is going to land, putting them perfectly in 1 Incinerate range. Now, there's no longer a win con. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We move to set number 2, picking up a very nice lead, Moltres into Quagsire, but my opponent's Empoleon safe switch does leave me a little bit stun-locked. Arguably, I should have sent in the Aegislash, but considering it's the Shadow Empoleon, the Hydro Cannons do quite a bit more damage. So I decide to stay in with the Galarian Moltres, but honestly, I don't think this was the greatest decision ever, because now I send in the Aegislash, but the timers are very heavily misaligned, and this should allow Empoleon to get a pretty massive energy head start. Empoleon will fire off Hydro Cannon. That does do a lot more damage than a regular Empoleon's Hydro Cannon would. And I'm going to be no shielding as a second Hydro Cannon is going to connect. I farm up 1 additional charging and then fire off the Shadow Ball. I just want to get Empoleon off the field as quickly as I possibly can. Shadow Ball is going to connect. Down goes Empoleon, and when they send in Quagsire, I pivot into the Galarian Moltres. They send out Togekiss, and this is a pretty frail Pokemon. I full send the Brave Bird connects, but Togekiss survives, 1 HP remaining, and that is a devastating survive for me. Now, I'm forced to either give up the Galarian Moltres or give up my final shield. I decide to give up the Galarian Moltres, but my Shadow Camerupt is not going to be a big fan of this Quagsire. Quagsire will fire off the Aqua Tail. I should pretty safely be able to bait with the Rock Tomb, but unfortunately, I am very, very low on this Aegislash. Rock Tomb will get the shield, I pivot into the Aegislash, and if they have Mud Bomb, all is lost. However, if they don't, I can survive an Aqua Tail. It is just an Aqua Tail. It's going to be a race Quagsire versus the Aegislash, and we lose charge attack priority. So close, yet so far. Aqua Tail takes the knockout. In comes Camerupt. We're always going to get outpaced, and unfortunately, we lose our first game with this team. We move to game number 2 of the set, and we pick up a pretty rough lead, Galarian Moltres into Florges. I'm going to stay in the matchup. Unfortunately, I end up lagging a turn, and I don't end up getting my Sucker Punch sneak. This Florges is actually on Disarming Voice too, so I lose a ton of HP. I save switch into the Camerupt, and my opponent is going to respond with Diggersby. This is a very good bait out. Aegislash is a terrible matchup into Diggersby, and Scorching Sands inflicts some pretty devastating damage. I have to respect the Scorching Sands. My opponent is going to full send, and that is very nice. A lot of people like to bait Camerupt, but you kind of can't really ever afford to call a bait because Camerupt gets destroyed by even resisted damage in a lot of circumstances. My opponent only throws one Mud Shot in the move there, so I am just going to go for a double shield and a full farm down. They pivot into Florges. I get to save energy and send in Aegislash. Aegislash is about to get debuffed again and again and again because this Florges does have a decent amount of energy. However, they've already taken a lot of damage, so even though I'm going to be very heavily debuffed, I will still very easily be able to knock out this Florges. Florges goes for Chilly Water number 2. I'm going to keep farming as they go for Chilly Water number 3. And now that they've done a decent amount of damage onto the Aegislash, I can look to unleash Gyro Ball and take the knockout. I would love to be able to pivot out of this matchup if possible because I am very heavily debuffed. I fire off Gyro Ball. That takes the knockout. What does my opponent have in the back? Are they going to bring back in the Diggersby? They do not. Instead, they bring in a Primeape, and this actually looks like a winning endgame for me. I just have to ensure that my opponent does not get a catch. I send in the Camerupt. That's going to force energy, and my opponent is now 3 Karate Chops away from the Rage Fist. I'm 2 off the Moltres. They need a catch to win. I send in the Moltres. They don't get the catch, and that is going to seal it. Back in comes Primeape. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We've got a massive core breaker on the lead in the next match, and its name is Guzzlord. Now, I had very nice results with this team, but this team definitely has its fair share of core breakers. It requires very precise play to play around mons like Stunfisk and Guzzlord because they're just so strong into this team. My opponent, after landing the Sludge Bomb, save switches into Empoleon, and because this is not the Shadow Empoleon, I have a very safe play to just bank energy and send in Aegislash. Aegislash's matchup is just so commanding. Empoleon farming up massively, so I decided to fire off the Shadow Ball. I was trying to CMP tie them as they made their back-to-back Hydro Cannons, but my opponent's not going to fall for that. Instead, they're going to put up the shield, and I'm going to shield back so I can switch Aegislash back into the bulky shield form. So now, I can very comfortably survive a Hydro Cannon. I'm going to farm up, and this time I actually get the CMP tie that I was looking for. Aegislash in shield form will always lose charge attack priority, and that is for the best, because I would always rather take the damage on Aegislash when it's in its bulky shield form, and then pivot to blade form to inflict massive damage. Shadow Ball will be shielded, and Empoleon looking for a farm down, but they cannot get there. Aegislash would have made it to a move, and I decide to let this go, because I'm going to try and go for a very aggressive Camerupt farm down. However, the moment I see the first Incinerate land, I realize I am not getting this farm down. My opponent pivots back into the Guzzlord. I switch into Galarian Moltres, and I snipe them with the Brave Bird. Brave Bird is going to take the knockout. Down goes Guzzlord. My opponent should be energy dry on the Empoleon, and I still haven't seen what they have in the back. They bring in the Empoleon looking for a farm down, and they don't get it. I'm able to make the Fly. Fly is going to be knocking out the Empoleon. What is that final Pokemon in the back? It's a Gourgeist, and this game is actually going to be a win. I am outside of Seed Bomb range. They have to commit to the Shadow Ball, but they're not winning charge attack priority. Camerupt CMP ties Rock Tomb to the Shadow Ball. Rock Tomb knocks out the Gourgeist, and somehow, against all odds, we're able to get a win. We pick up a pretty decent lead in the next match, Galarian Moltres into Togekiss. Now, this matchup being a decent lead for Moltres feels a bit odd, but it is the truth. Since very few Togekiss are running Dazzling Gleam, they're stuck throwing Aura Sphere in this matchup, and while Aura Sphere is a very efficient attack, Galarian Moltres is pretty bulky, so I'm going to be able to force them to throw a second Aura Sphere. I've already gotten shield advantage, and now that I'm able to force all their energy, I can send in my Aegislash, because Aegislash is the hardest counter to Togekiss in the game. They pivot out into a Bug Bite Fortress, and it's time. Send in the Camerupt. Camerupt just going to go for a one shield farm down and exit with a ton of energy. I'm going to exit with the Rock Tomb loaded to threaten that Togekiss, but they don't bring it in. Instead, they send in a Shadow Swampert. Camerupt going for the Scorching Sands. Scorching Sands connects. Swampert gets destroyed. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Hopping into the final match, looking for the 4-1 set, and what a lead. We get an amazing matchup, Moltres into Galarian Corsola. My opponent safe switches into Empoleon. I bank a ton of energy on the Moltres and then send in the Aegislash. My goal with Aegislash is just to absorb energy and try and get as close as possible to the back-to-back Shadow Balls. With the energy advantage that I gave my opponent, they will be able to make 4 Hydro Cannons here, and 4 Hydro Cannons would come pretty close to securing the knockout. As a result, I'm going to have to fire off the Shadow Ball before I get the double up. Hydro Cannon is going to land. I go for the Shadow Ball, but they snipe me with Galarian Corsola. I'm full sending Shadow Ball, but the Astonish went through. Corsola survives it on 1 HP. I get a little bit of energy with Moltres, but I lost so much energy on Aegislash. That was a really heads-up play from my opponent. They were able to preserve that Empoleon. The good news for me is my Galarian Moltres didn't really take a lot of damage early in the game, so I'm still outside of Hydro Cannon range. So, even though the Empoleon has a massive amount of energy, I feel very comfortable letting the Moltres go. Hydro Cannon lands, Moltres survives, we make it to the Fly, and now my opponent, are they really willing to give up that final shield? Fly is going to connect, taking the knockout. In the back is Altaria, and this game is a win. We're going to get our 4-1 set, because Shadow Camerupt is able to win the 1 shield against Altaria. Actually, I completely forgot. We had 2 shields here. So it's not even the 1 shield. We're at the 2-1. So we are in a very commanding spot with Camerupt. Camerupt able to make Rock Tomb number 2. And just purely off the resist incinerate damage, we've already put them in range. Rock Tomb connects. Down goes Altaria. And that is a good game. This is a very difficult team to pilot, but my goodness, is it so much fun to run. I'm very surprised. If you asked me at the start of the season, if I thought that there would be a climbing team that featured Shadow Camerupt, I would have thought you were absolutely crazy. I would not have believed it, even with the buffs to Camerupt this season. But Camerupt, in a very weird way, has been enabled to have success because of Aegislash. Camerupt and Aegislash are 2 Pokemon that absolutely love shield advantage. And Galarian Moltres is a Pokemon that's very good at generating shield advantage. I think the big learning curve with a team like this comes from needing to have a very good understanding of when to use your shields and when you can try and send in one of these 2 sweepers. I'm just very happy that after shoutcasting this team and seeing how fun it looked, the team was just as fun to play. Again, I do want to stress that it's a very tricky team to pilot with 2 Pokemon in the back that I feel have massive upside but also massive downside as well. Like Shadow Camerupt and Aegislash are probably 2 of the Pokemon that have the highest advantage states. Like when they're up a shield, when they're up energy, they're kind of beating everything, but also 2 of the worst disadvantage states. Like if you have an Aegislash and it's in a 2 shield scenario versus an opponent, unless it's like a Carbink or something, you're probably getting destroyed. Same with the Camerupt. If the Camerupt's ever down a shield, the Camerupt is going to get completely obliterated. So just based off of that, I do think there's quite a bit of nuance to running a team like this, but man, it is a very fun way to spend your sets. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed watching it, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.